Andy Hoare, welcome to Friday 15, everyone. This is Friday 15, May 10th, and a busy week this week. Lots to report from the field. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoare, and we are with Master B2B, the leading or the only trusted community for B2B e-commerce professionals the galaxy. Andy, great to be here on Friday.
Yeah, it's great to be here as well. I can't wait to dig in. We're going to recap what happened this week, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really cool. We did some good traveling this week, and lots of good stuff to dive in on. So let's start with some breaking news. I love that. Here we go. So Andy, this week, Forrester Research released the Forrester Wave for B2B Q2 2024. Lots of platforms on it. This came out while we were at the conference. Lots of vendors talking about it. I didn't hear as many practitioners talking about it, but interesting. Do you see this? I'm sure you did.
I did, yeah, and it reminded me of the old days. And I got the DTs a little bit because I used to do this wave report. And one of the things I did when I left Forrester to start Paradigm is I sort of thought it's time to reimagine this report. In fact, there's been much written by people in the last couple of years about these reports, Gartner, Forrester, et cetera.
Sure.
And I think my issue with it, and by the way, Joe does fine research, and there's a lot of detail in here. But my issue with the Wave and the Gartner Magic Quadrant is that it's kind of a loser-leader metaphor. Either you're a leader or you're a loser.
Right.
So everybody fights in the upper corner, and everything else gets lost. And by the way, as you pointed out, only the vendors always seem to care about it. So I came up with a different methodology, and I'm in my 6th year of doing that. And in a couple of months, mine will be coming out. But just very briefly, how mine differs from that, and where I think I've resolved some of these issues, is that I'm not looking for decathletes here. You can't get a composite score and end up in the leader category, which is what we always found. Like every year, IBM would be in the leader category, even though they weren't great at anything. They were good at many things, but not great at anything. I like to double click and get deeper. So for those of you who can see this on screen, you can see that I cover 12 categories, and you can get a gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal, or no medal in 12 categories. As a result, what you end up seeing is what's on the next slide, which is you can dig down into a particular area. So if you're looking for a company with a strong promotions engine or a great partner community, you can find out who's really good at that and buy according to that, because some things people don't need, but that all factors into a composite score, which puts the decathletes in the upper right-hand quadrant, when in fact people are looking for the world champions in each area.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Andy. I think it's very practical the way you've broken this out, and very useful for practitioners as well. By the way, for those of you on the podcast, what Andy's referring to, because you never said the name of it, Andy, is the Paradigm B2B Combine. So Paradigm B2B Combine. So look for that coming out, I think, in a couple months, right, Andy?
And by the way, I do it for both the mid-market and the enterprise because the solutions are different. I don't think it's a good idea to aggregate them all together. It's like putting all the cars into one big category called cars, when in fact, if you're looking for a truck or an EV or a small car or whatever, they're different. And so I think you got to get more granular about these things.
Yep. No, good stuff, guys. And thank you, Andy, for doing that. So let's get to our report from the field. Andy, you and I were at B2B Online Chicago this week. It was packed, man. There were a lot of people there. I think bigger than maybe they've ever had. It was at the Marriott downtown Chicago over the course of 3 days. Lots of great networking. We had several dinners at the show. Where we brought together, the leaders. We got all the speakers for the most part, Andy, to our dinners. A lot of the luminaries, joined us, and just really for some great conversation, and networking too. I mean, it's great when you get folks into a room like it. When I was at my dinner, I had a whole host of at my table. VPs like Stacey Hanks was sitting at my table with me. Adrian Hartman from JJ Keller. Alexandra Lloyd from Alltech, Rima Westermeyer from Schneider Electric, Carlos Camacho from Bausch and Lomb. These are folks all.
Somebody's name dropping today.
I am. I'm just looking at the picture here for those of you watching online of me with these fine folks, and it's just a great I mean, it was a great group of people, and the level of conversation was fantastic. And we have some learnings we're going to share in a moment. But Andy, any takeaways from your dinners that you were doing?
Yeah, I think this is where the real magic is at these events now. I've often been told by the practitioners, like, hey, if we want to meet a vendor, we'll reach out to them. There's lots of ways for us to find them. And in fact, people were telling me at B2B Online that they were getting, the sponsors were saying they get better traction and better traffic in the hallway outside of the exhibit hall than actually in the exhibit hall itself, because practitioners don't really want to go into the exhibit halls because it's a feeding frenzy. You walk in and then there's a light that goes off. I'm joking. And there's a target on your back, and everybody wants to talk to you and scan your badge and then get you in their system, et cetera. And a lot of people subject themselves to it, but they still have a need for solutions. And we think actually this format with dinners and meetings and informality, our approach to this is maybe a better solution to doing that, because when you sit next to somebody and you say, yeah, I'm really struggling with my data, and they go, well, what are you struggling with? And you talk person to person. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but that's why people like our dinners, because it's relaxing, it's fun, it's interesting, and you get to know people as people.
Well, that's right. And kudos to Ryan and Frank at WBR too. I mean, they're doing some things that are good at that event to try to facilitate that. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, and we know the game. I was a VP of e-commerce for years. I actually would get a lot out of the vendor halls, but I'd always want to take it in doses, right? Where I'd go through, and what I would do is I'd look for the vendors or the solution providers that I never heard of, because I want to understand where the investment's going. Like, what these guys are all VC funded for the most part, right? Venture funded. If they're sitting there at the show spending the money to have a booth, what are they doing? Because again, they're investing in areas to solve problems. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's getting closer, Andy. B2B is to where B2C is, has been for 10 years. Regarding, you see a little more of the, hiding of badges these days, right? And so it's becoming, I think, a little more challenging for the vendors, the solution providers, to stand out. And I think this is a way to.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues is, it used to be back in the day, and this is some of a legacy of that. It used to be the only way to get the information was to see somebody in person and meet them at an event. There are people, I've seen this with my own two eyes, where there are practitioners who've gone up to booths, and there might be a junior person at the booth. The practitioner knows more about the product than the junior person in the booth.
Right.
Because they've already done their homework, they've researched online, they've gathered information. So that changes the game a little bit. And I think a lot of the vendors need to rethink their approach. Again, I agree with you that they do it well at B2B Online, but I think, the shop talks of the world have shown that maybe there's a different approach to these things. But we go with the practitioners and what they're looking for, and what they're telling us is, don't call me, I'll call you, to a large extent. But anyway.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So it's an evolving dynamic, but I think there's, it is the show that, people need to be at for B2B in terms of a conference, right? So some key themes we pulled away from the event. These are some things that we noticed in the sessions, we heard in a lot of our one-on-ones. As we met with, we had met with and talked to over 100 people at this event, and a lot of them really practitioners, but also we spent a lot of time with vendors. This is some of the things we heard. I'll go through these for our podcast listeners. Data is still a mess. PIM is foundational, but not the complete answer. I took a few notes as we were listening in on the sessions. One of the folks. This is some folks from O2 Commerce and Bloomreach, Andy, who we met with both of those companies. Choosing a PIM can help, but you have to change the organization around it. "Quote unquote," it's a new tool, but you have to change how you work. And this is coming from the vendor side, right? They're saying, hey, we can provide the tools, but the practitioners are saying, and you're starting to realize, I think, that it's not just about the tool. So that's one theme we heard. Channel conflict was another. Continue to be a barrier in e-commerce to e-commerce investments, particularly amongst manufacturers. And I'll allude to this a little later on my session that I ran. I moderated a session about this, and it was a clear theme. Investments are in digital. The other theme here, investments in digital are picking up versus last year. We heard this from a lot of vendors, which is important because they're the ones getting the dollars to build these systems and things. But caution is still there. We're not quite to a rapid pace, it doesn't seem. The AI buzz is the other thing, Andy. There was a lot of talk about AI. The buzz part is feel is kind of starting to wear off, but we're getting real use cases. Steve Martinez, VP of Digital Solutions at Univar, we met was Steve. Just as an example, he said on his panel, don't think of AI as a tool, think of it as a supplement to what you're already doing. So it's almost a change of mindset in how you're thinking about AI. It's not a solution, it's not a panacea. It is something though that can create organizational efficiency within your company. So we saw some of that, and then finally, a lot. This continues to be an issue, Andy, around analytics and measuring performance beyond just e-com penetration are top priorities amongst practitioners, manufacturers, and distributors. So just a lot of good fodder and conversation. A lot of it happened in the hallway, as you mentioned, and at dinners, but it was also talked about a lot on the panels in particular at the event.
Yeah, I'll just make one quick point about this on the AI side of things. I'm now starting to see this, and I've seen some things that some of the some of the vendors have shown me that AI in the form of a chatbot is now starting to displace some of the search capability. Because if you go to a website and you go to the search box and you search for something, that's one path. But you can also now talk to an AI infused chatbot, ask a question and get an answer back. That's basically an alternative to search, this is one we're going to watch, because in B2B, imagine if you could productize some chunk of that content, educate a bot, have AI do a lot of the answering. I saw something the other day that made me think, my prediction about death of a B2B salesman, this is more evidence of that. I saw a chatbot that basically could replace a salesperson, not the warm and fuzzies, not the, potentially the obscure kind of edge case scenarios, but for the vast majority of questions people have, it can answer it using AI. And I think that's going to be really important.
That came up, Andy, on one of the panels. Nils Olsen, he's the CCO, Chief Commercial Officer at Tacton, which is a manufacturer, I think. He said generative AI is great for the first step in the journey, the discovery phase. It's really helping with that and helping customers to find the product that'll solve their problem. So I think there's something to that, right? Where AI is starting to really penetrate and maybe even take, quote unquote, maybe visit share is the word to use, but share of the time on site from traditional search. It's interesting. So we had this debate, Andy, team modern versus team traditional. What was the core of this debate? What was the question here? This was a funny one and fun.
Well, we departed from our usual here and decided something a little bit, entertaining, more entertaining than usual. And it was about this idea of generations communicating with one another, because it's something you hear about a lot. In fact, if you look at some of the data around this, you'll see that there basically are 6 generations cooperating in the workplace today. 6. Right. We just focused on 4. But the 4 are baby boomers who are like 60 to 78 years old today, Gen X, which is most of the people in senior management, 44 to 59. You got millennials who are 28 to 43. And then the last part is the Gen Z group. And this turned out to be kind of everybody against Gen Z, which is sort of the way we wanted to go.
Yeah. Look at the stat, Andy. 74% of business leaders report that they find Gen Z more difficult to work with than any other generation. The quote, this group tends to feel entitled and demonstrate a lack of effort, motivation, and productivity. My goodness. That's from a resumebuilder.com survey in 2023. Anyway,
they will tell you that it's because they're not motivated. They got to feel passionate about what they're doing. There was another stat we showed that we're not going to show here that had something like 59% of Gen Zers felt tired or worn out at the end of a day of work, whereas it was only 35% of baby boomers. I remember we joked that either one group is either really soft and the other group is really hard, or the older group just has a different perspective on work and the young group has a different perspective on work. We're not quite sure what it is, but it does create a conflict where twice as many people feel worn out at the end of the day. Can you imagine what that's like for, the older group, the baby boomers who are saying, hey, we just got started, it's only 5 o'clock. You got to work till 7. They're like, no, I got a whiskey tasting at 6:30. I'm out of here.
So this was our main stage debate, folks. For those of you who are listening on our podcast, where we we actually asked the audience to vote on which approach was better across a couple different questions. We'll get to that in a second. But one of the funniest things we talked about was this Gen Z speak. And we actually had several folks who understood Gen Z speak. I don't understand it, but here's a quick quote. It's so funny. Stacey Hanks read this. She's the VP of e-commerce at SureWorks, and she read this on stage. So she asked one of her friends who's a Gen Zer to give her some Gen Z corporate speak. See if you understand this, Andy. Corporate America can be low-key, be slay if you're on your grind set. Bread ain't going to make itself, and on everything, you got to work hard. No cap. What the heck does that mean?
No idea what that meant. None whatsoever. And everybody laughed. But this should show you they have their own, Gen Z's got its own dialogue, largely, I think, built out of texting and social media, where they shorten everything and try to be different with the language. I mean, language evolves. It always does. It always will. But boy, to look at the English language and see this conglomeration of words that mean nothing to us was a little bit disturbing. But it was fun. It was fun to do, and some people knew what it meant.
Andy, just low key if you vibe. Did I say that right? Yeah, I did. Actually,
I don't know.
I speak Gen Z.
Perhaps.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and we actually asked these questions, and got some results. The questions we asked, it was a sweep for team modern, is what we called it, which is
my team, not your team.
Yeah. I lost again. But the questions were: what approach is better to evaluating performance of employees this year in 2024? Which approaches to working styles is better? Which approach to business communication is better? And across the board, people said, hey, we've got to adapt, and this more modern style, we talked about it across many different elements is the way to go. So it was a lot of fun, and the audience got into it, and everybody voted. We had hundreds of people in the audience. It was great. So one other thing I want to mention is I did this panel, Andy, on demystifying marketplaces. And, I talked about this a little earlier in our Friday 15. There's so much confusion about first party versus third party marketplaces. People think about it in the context of Amazon versus, running your own marketplace versus selling on a third party marketplace. So I had a great panel, Sal from VP of Digital at Covetris, Rima from Schneider, Billy Haynes. And also we had Brandon Gracie from Shopify, which is interesting because Shopify is getting more and more now into the B2B side of things as we see them on the Wave and other places. And so, but the key takeaway of this was really channel conflict, right? And there's still this pervasive fear of channel conflict, and it's manufacturers, it's distributors, and the fear. And one thing that came out of it was, hey, we can use marketplaces as a way to mitigate that. If I'm a manufacturer, drive traffic to my channel. But there's also a fear of competing with the channel and preventing manufacturers from doing some of these things. So it's a fascinating discussion, but the overall theme was there, and there's a lot to unpack here. But it was a really good discussion. So yeah, go ahead.
What we conclude here is that companies have an archaic mindset around the way a marketplace operates. They see it as competitive, and it's all internally, operationally focused. Like, can we make this work internally? How does this work for our partner channel? And what's never, ever said first in any of these conversations is, what do customers want to do? Where do they want to buy? And if you flip it around and really diagram it from their perspective, I have very rarely seen examples of large companies, especially brand manufacturers, who didn't have a really good argument for participating in and running, in many cases, their own marketplaces. We can talk about other areas where it might be different, but just to swear off a marketplace because our channel doesn't like it, very, very rarely is that the case the better case for B2B buyers today.
The fascinating contrast, Andy, I spend a lot of time with Amazon through my company in SIBA, where we work with B2B companies on their Amazon strategy. The language that's used by Amazon business and the people that work there, it's the contrast. It's all about the customer. It's all they talk about. And so, versus, talking to a distributor or a manufacturer, the customer is almost secondary to our internal concerns and alignment. So yeah, I think there's a real there. It's changing though. It's just out of necessity. So we're at Friday 20 as usual, folks. So we got a couple quick announcements we want to make. The first is our summit is coming up in June 4th. We now have a waiting list. We are completely full. We got, if everyone shows up, we're screwed. I'm joking a little bit. But no,
well, if everybody shows up, Brian, you won't be able to attend.
That's right. I'm not going to be there. You and I will have to go, hang out somewhere else. It's at the University of Chicago's Gleacher Center. Again, we're full, but we do have a waiting list. So do go ahead and sign up on our website. If you'd like to, get a seat, we can put you on that waiting list. We will have some people that can't make it last minute. That always happens. So we'd love to get you in. Just make sure you get on the list, masterb2b.com, and click on events. We also have our forum, which is continuing to grow at a very nice rate with lots of conversations happening there. It's practitioner only. Go to masterb2b.com, click on forum, and submit an application to join the forum. Hope to see you there soon. Again, a very vibrant place. And again, only practitioners. So, Andy, any final words for our audience today? We're coming back next week, but any final words of wisdom for the group?
No, it's nice to be back at home because this is conference season and it's constant travel. And there's a brief respite here before the summit begins. Fortunately, that's in Chicago, so I don't have to travel for that either. But it's nice to be home for a little bit, and can't wait for the summit.
Awesome. Me neither. Okay, folks, we'll see you next week on our next Friday 15. Thanks for joining today.